we are constantly encountering situations where school systems and school districts will call Child Protective Services on the Marshallese families that we support because of cultural issues, right? Mm-hmm. Because time is very much a concept that is engaged with and prioritized differently in the Marshallese community. And so this idea that I tell you where to be somewhere and, 3 minutes before that time, you're going to show up with bells on is a ludicrous concept within that community.
Hey, everybody, this is Tony.
And this is Paul. We're coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast.
Hey, I'm Tony Stewart. I like to read books on leadership. What? Thanks. Hey, everybody, I'm Paul with Friends for Life. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Friends for Life podcast. This is the Sarah takeover while Tony and Paul are out on the road interviewing people in all 88 counties. We're so happy you joined us today. And let's go meet our guests. Syard, do you want to introduce yourself? Give a little blurb about who you are, what you do.
Sure. My name is Syard Evans. I am the CEO of Arkansas Support Network. Arkansas Support Network is a statewide home and community-based provider in Arkansas. We, as an organization, have been in existence for about 34 years and really have a well-earned reputation of being kind of radical and pushing the envelope in the way that we support and serve people. Arkansas is very much an institutionally biased state. Even in our HCBS services, the vast majority of folks working in this space kind of operate with the belief system that folks with disabilities are just a little bit less human than other folks. Not that anybody would say that out loud or really admit that, but that really is the basis and the foundation. And so it means that where oftentimes our service systems are committed to giving people a quality of life that looks good, that's clean, and that's safe, and that's kind of contained. But it often alleviates some of the real aspects of life, the dignity of risk, and supporting people to pursue the same goals that everybody else pursues. So ASN was really founded on the premise of pushing the envelope and being an alternative to that. We were founded by 5 moms who just looked around in the 80s and said, this is not this service system, this education system is not what we want for our kids. And so they founded an organization that would really strive to provide alternatives to residential, restricted, segregated services. So we support folks all across the state, really to live life whatever they want life to look like. And we're pretty radical in our dedication to doing that, which means we wind up fighting with a lot of people for the ability for people to make mistakes and people to engage in risky endeavors and all of that kind of stuff. And I love it. I landed here when I was 19 years old. I thought that I was taking a part-time job to support my social life, which is what I was majoring in college at the time. And I was really good at it. I was good at it. It's probably the best thing I've ever done. But I tripped and I landed here and I blinked. And 22 years later, I'm the CEO of the organization. But I always say I started as a DSP. I love being a DSP. And if somebody would ever come along and take on these responsibilities of the CEO position, I'd go back to being a DSP because it's the best job I've ever had. And I spend a lot of my time these days really fighting for some legitimacy of the profession, really working to try to dispel the myths that home and community-based direct support professionals are just glorified babysitters, and really trying to bring some attention and some much-needed resources to the profession. So I don't know. I think that's a good start of me and who I am.
No, I love it. We talk a lot about just the DSP role and how we can really support, like, because how do you support people in, I love what you said, because RVI's mission statement is to move people towards the life they want to live, right? Like not, have this quality life or this safe life. Like you choose what's the life you want to live. What does that look like for you? I have tons of ideas I want to push you towards, but nope, it's not about me. And how do we really like look at that role and understand like when you're supporting people, like when you're helping facilitate that good life or whatever life that looks like for them, how did it get to be, oh, this is an entry-level position? Like, how did that happen? Any other care field you look at, like, well, not any, like there's obviously any Medicaid service that you're running into seems to have this issue, but like it's such an important job and we've just made it this entry-level position. And so we always talk about that and like just that struggle with what that looks like and how do we make other people see that, the value and worth and all of that. So when I met you, I came to an amazing session, right? And you were talking about putting the human back in human services. And I was wondering if you could talk about that just a little bit, because I feel like that really kind of combines what you just said, like those two things that you just said, right? We work with people with disabilities. We need to value their humanity and their worth, but like we just work with humans in general. And as much as people with disabilities are often devalued, I think a lot could be said for, the DSP role and stuff like that. So I just love your concept of like, yes, there are certain populations of people, right, that we have devalued more than others, and we have to recognize that, and we have to figure out how to move forward and to kind of like end that oppressive nature. But also, we're all just humans at the end of the day. And so I was wondering if you could just like share some blurbs of that, because I literally like was just sitting there like, I love her. So,
yes, I can. Let me start by kind of meandering the path maybe to getting to that place, to this conceptualization that I call centering the humans in human services, and I talk about a lot. And for me, it is really kind of there's nothing radical or revolutionary in it, but I know that there's everything radical and revolutionary in it. The conversations that I have with other people, the responses I get from sessions, the feedback that we get in kind of speaking these truths makes it very clear that it is very much radical and revolutionary in the approach. But, when I showed up at ASN and I started doing this work, I just had some kind of intuitive abilities to listen to people and to hear people. And for whatever reason, I had a really good supervisor. When I started, my home supervisor was great. My first program manager was great. And they were folks that believed in the work and the mission of the organization. But I really haven't encountered a whole lot of people that were as radical as I am in the thought process or the approach to this work. But I grew up in a home that was really impacted by kind of mental health. And I learned as a kid how to prioritize other people's needs over my own in kind of navigating that environment. And I often say that I brought that skill into this work and then learned some of the philosophical stuff on top of it. And it was just an instantaneous click. And then the first assignment that I ever had was as a DSP was working with two teenage boys who were both in the custody of the state of Arkansas, who had both just recently discharged from a sex offender treatment, a juvenile sex offender treatment. And so first, when I said, that's when I looked at the list of openings and I said, hey, that's the position that I want. My soon-to-be program manager at the time said, I'm sorry, I can't hire you for that position. It's male only. which just did not sit well with me. Never in my life has being told that I can't do something because I don't have a penis ever sat well with me. Like, that's never something I'm going to respond well to. And so I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And he was like, well, it's just a restriction of the position and, all these things, all this justification. And I said, I had a t-shirt when I was a toddler that said anything boys can do, girls can do better. Like, I cannot conceptualize what you're saying to me that I can't do this work. Like, tell me what it is. I grew up on a dairy farm. Like, I cannot, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so after about 25 minutes of badgering him, he finally said, fine, we'll give it a 60-day trial. And so we went into that, knowing that I need to know some things. I need to, be, informed or educated, this whole boundaries of folks that have had sexually acting out behaviors and what that looks like and what, cognitive limitations has to do with that. And so I just started researching, and one of the best things that ever happened in my career was that I stumbled upon Dave Hingsberger's work early on. And so, one of the first, first deep dives into learning this work and learning this profession was centered around the ring of safety and the prison of protection. And that really started me learning and considering and thinking about intentionally making decisions about the people that I was supporting versus how the majority of human beings show up in the world. And that is to first and foremost make decisions about where we are and our comfort level and how we feel and all of those things. And so that kind of cracked the door open. I've also, the majority of my life, been a white person in a Black family. I grew up in a very rural area in Arkansas that was predominantly all white. And in the 6th grade, I befriended one of my competitors in basketball who she was mixed and her 3 siblings are mixed and her mom was white, and they were living in the middle of rural white Arkansas and experiencing all kind of the hate and violence that goes along with that. And so I had this front row seat to a lot of that I was really able to see and experience in a way that most white people don't get to. And so, so many things about our lives together, and we're still best friends today, really impacted the lens that I was able to see the world around me through. And it's interesting to me because there are so many lessons that I got to learn from the experiences that she encountered with racism in our childhood that she didn't sit at a safe enough distance to even be able to absorb. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty revolutionary for me to understand. I think we were in our early 30s, and we had gone to lunch one day, and we were talking. She was talking about some racist woman at work, and she was really frustrated, and she was kind of ranting about some stuff. And she said, this woman said these things, and it immediately made me remember when we were teenagers that my aunt had a cross burnt on her lawn. And so my friend was like, I honestly had forgotten all about, I had suppressed that from my memory. I just didn't remember it until we were in the midst of this conversation. And I got so just choked up, couldn't talk, and sat there for a minute. And finally she was like, what are you experiencing? And I said, I think about that every day of my life. I remember being that 14-year-old kid at your house, and the phone call that came in, and the panic that the adults had in their voices, and just the fear. And I think about that every day of my life, still to this day. And the fact that just those two experiences, how different. I mean, we were both there when that phone rang. We were both there and absorbed all of that in. And she sat so close to the danger and violence around her that she couldn't allow that to really seep in and influence the way she thought about the world around her and the people that she was interacting with. I still carry it with me to this day, and I resent the hell out of the people that we grew up with, and the community that we grew up in, and it just really, it really pointed me in a direction of not relying on those systems of understanding that just get fed to us, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was never enough for me. That was such a violation, and that was such a harm to people that I loved, it just wasn't enough. It didn't matter what everybody else said, and it didn't matter those things that you were told. And it didn't matter that in questioning those systems, I really had to question my own whiteness and how I contributed to that. It was a violation, I think, that really kind of kicked off this whole lifelong learning. And so the majority of what I talk about when I talk about centering humans are concepts that come from anti-racism work. The fact that they apply so readily and directly to disability justice is because systems of oppression are very much predictable beings, right? Or predictable entities, that oppression is oppression is oppression. And our entire society is built on oppression. It's built on some people really succeeding and gaining ground in this world based on the marginalization and oppression of other people. And so what we've been able to do at ASN is to really have tough conversations about, first and foremost, acknowledging those systems of oppression. We talk all the time about the fact that you gotta say tough words, and you've got to own tough truths. That you've got to, we don't talk about unconscious bias, and we don't talk about some of the comfort words around the violence of systemic oppression. We say things like white supremacy and patriarchy and colonization, and we talk about white violence, and we talk about really the realities that exist when it comes to systemic oppression and how that impacts marginalized people. And, we try to own the opportunities to improve in our culture and to really grow, as opposed to creating a picture that says we're good at this, right? Mm-hmm. Most entities and organizations that are really devoted to DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, really have they're pointed towards good reports. They're pointed towards saying, this is how many people we have that work for us that are diverse, right? Counting heads kind of thing. They're pointed towards saying that we've invested this much money in awareness type activities. All of those are really superficial, and all of those are really public facing, and they're designed to be good PR, really. Mm-hmm. That is not changing culture, right? What changes culture is to embrace the truths and the realities, even when they're negative towards you, to be invested in the difficult conversations and the growth that comes out of those difficult conversations, and to really commit to creating safe spaces for people to be their genuine and legitimate selves. One of the things I talk a lot about in centering the humans is diversity via assimilation, which is an approach that you see commonly. We want to be able to say that we're a diverse organization, and we want to have folks here that look diverse, but we want them to act white. We want them to act like they don't have a disability. We want them to act, in all of these ways. We really want them to assimilate to the dominant culture for our comfort level. But we want to get the kudos and the benefits of having a diverse organization and supporting diverse people. And really that is more harmful than if you just left people alone, than if you just said, hey, we are a white abled culture here. That's who we are. That's who we're going to be. The invitation to really invite people into spaces that truly aren't welcoming to them is a form of violence in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the revelation that I really latched onto probably 6 or 8 years ago and really started prioritizing what we were doing here because I see it in every helping profession where the point at which you get to being the expert in the helping profession is that you go to graduate school, you access higher education, you get these degrees, you get these higher paying jobs, and you create all of these layers of distance from the people that you're supporting. And then the common theme is you have these folks, we see it in disability services, we see it in social work in general, we see it in the medical profession, we see it in any type of human service where you have these professionals who start out with the best of intentions, right? I want to help people. And they sit in the protected cloud of their power and privilege. And they bring their own ideas about life into people's lives. And when marginalized folks reject that, or they don't succeed with that ideology, we actually blame them. Right? Mm-hmm. We get mad at them. Like, you aren't doing what I said. And so therefore you're not being successful, or your life looks like you live in a trailer and, you have this kind of community living with family and close folks and that it doesn't look clean enough for me, or it doesn't look, put together enough for me. So here I am every day actively trying to change those components of your culture that are comfortable to you. That's what you want life to look like, instead of saying, what is it that you need me to help with? Right? We show up in people's lives. We bring these power-oriented ideas about their life into their lives, and we try to force those on them. And then we get mad at them when they don't succeed at the goals that we lay out for them.
I think the whole assimilating things in the systems of oppression, because I feel so I am very interested in social role valorization, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's an interesting concept, and just the idea behind it I don't think is necessarily bad. I've done some studying in it. But just this idea that we have to somehow, because it comes from the theory of normalization, right? Wolfensberger, I can't say it ever. But so it comes from this theory of normalization, which is we have to fit people into our society. We have to somehow normalize them. And then when I came from the disability studies background, it was I'm going to let my freak flag fly, and I'm going to be good. I don't have to be normalized. I can be who I am and still have value. And then I was just speaking to a bunch of moms, and the one just totally destroyed my train of thought and my mind, because she was they're looking to do something for their kids. And actually, when you were saying how ASN got started, I'm oh, I know a group of moms like that. That's amazing. But they're looking to do something for their kids, and they have this whole dream and vision. And they met with some higher ups, and basically these higher ups said, well, that diminishes their inherent value. And this one mama was they talk so much about making sure that everyone else knows that my child has value. It makes me think that they don't think that they do. Like, you're pushing so hard for this. It makes me feel like you're trying to convince yourself. And no one needs convinced that my child has value and is worthy and, deserves all these things that everyone else does. So I've definitely been thinking about that a lot lately, because sometimes it's just so much easier for us to say, okay, can we just try and fit in this little box? Can we do some barbecues in your neighborhood? Can we, and not saying you shouldn't do that stuff, but like just trying to change the person to fit into this system when maybe we just need to burn down the system.
Yes, burn down. I'm glad that you said that. And because I think what happens, one of the things that we see a lot are wealthy families, well-to-do families. They're almost always white families in our area, really have a drive for what I call snow globe services, where they want to create this support system that gives the illusion of a regular life. It's like the Truman Show, right? Where we want to be able to give people the prescribed experiences that we want them to have, to your point, to kind of map out the value of people with disabilities and the lives that they live, but only when they look like they're only valuable when they look like the life that I think it should look like, right? Which is not only problematic for people with disabilities, it's problematic for human beings in general, right? If you look at oppression and systemic oppression, there are aspects of our society that really get condemned and really get vilified, that are ridiculous. There's no reason for it. One example that I always give when we talk about this is that in Northwest Arkansas, we have a very large population of Marshallese. There are actually more Marshallese children in the Springdale school districts than there are Marshallese children on the Marshall Islands. And there's a long, horrible, awful history with that. The Marshall Islands were used for testing of nuclear weapons by the United States, and the United States basically destroyed the entire island. It is a toxic place to be today. And that, coupled with global warming, the islands are also sinking. So they're radioactive and toxic, and they're sinking. And so as a form of a very quiet and non-public reparations for the Marshallese people, the United States government has given them a dual citizenship status. And so they can come and go as they wish. And Springdale wound up being a place in like the late 70s, early 80s, where one of the leaders of the Marshallese community, at the time, most of the migration back and forth was California. And folks were really struggling to find the jobs that they could do, that they were qualified to do, and that that were a good fit for their community. And so one of the leaders kind of took off across the country and wound up all the way in Springdale, Arkansas, where we have a significant chicken factory industry, chicken processing. Tyson Foods is based out of Springdale, Arkansas. And so there was this like rich environment for employment. So we today support lots of families who are Marshallese, who have kids with disabilities. And it's really interesting because the Marshallese community has a very narrow language vocabulary. I think the language in and of itself has about 300 words. So when you start to translate things to English, the majority of English words don't have Marshallese translation, especially words that have to do with services, right? Disability services, Medicaid, all those kinds of things. And so we do a lot of educational advocacy with families who have kids with disabilities in the Marshallese community. And we are constantly encountering situations where school systems and school districts will call Child Protective Services on the Marshallese families that we support because of cultural issues, right? Mm-hmm. Because time is very much a concept that is engaged with and prioritized differently in the Marshallese community. And so this idea that I tell you where to be somewhere and, 3 minutes before that time, you're going to show up with bells on is a ludicrous concept within that community. The Marshallese community is very much a collectivist community. And so you have multi-generational homes. You have lots of different families living in the same housing structures, things like that. The Marshallese community thinks that we are a little ridiculous when it comes to like bed frames and things like that. Like just stuff that makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
Living on the island, grown up on the island. And we're constantly seeing Child Protective Services call families in for failure to make appointments, for mattresses on the floor, for, too many people based on their definition living in a home. There's no safety concerns. It is simply the cultural expectation that I, as the professional, as the person that has achieved all of these layers of additional power beyond even just being a white person in America, that my expectations of what your life should look like are right, and your expectations of what your life should look like are wrong. Mm-hmm. And we don't just judge people for that. We actually execute violence on them, right? We actually engage in systems that will take their children away. And we've had a couple of really high profile situations over the last probably 6 or 8 years, where we've had professionals getting involved in people's lives and then funneling out these really gross adoption networks. So they're, Marshallese kids were getting adopted away from their families because of these cultural variances that were getting their kids looped up in systems. And there were actually some folks that went to prison for some of the practices around that. But, it's just one example of this violence that when we are not committed to the work of really centering the people that we show up to support, even in much less obvious and much less grotesque ways, we execute violence on the people that we show up to support because we're not willing to do the work to center them and their desires, their goals, and their culture first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. I find that, so I do a lot of training on the different systems. So like me as a white educated woman with a disabled child and just the trauma that I have experienced at the hands of the system. And I think about that just like on crack, right? When there's also all these cultural differences, when there's everything that kind of goes around that and encompasses that. And it always really just strikes me, like the whole we're person-centered. But we're not working with the person. We're not working with their beliefs. We're not working with their culture. We're not working with any of that. And so and I struggle with this all the time. So maybe you can just like give me advice on this. Like I honestly go back and forth all the time. We need to burn the system down. We need to heal the system. We need to, and I just am always in this state of limbo, right? So obviously I work within the system. I recognize the harm that comes from these systems. And when you layer, children's services, when you layer the DD system, when you layer all these different systems, that's just more opportunity to harm people, even though we are helping. And why does our help always harm people? Like, can we just look at the impact of our work? Please, someone. But like, so how do you kind of navigate that? Obviously, you're working within the system. You have a radical approach. I love it. But like, how do you kind of find your balance in the work that you do?
Yeah. So definitely at my core, in my conceptualization of the world, I'm an abolitionist. I believe that these entities of control and authority should not be there and should not exist, and that really, the ways that we support people and ourselves and each other, the ways we should receive support should be about collective community care, right? Really looking at our relationships and our commitments to one another as human beings on an equal plane. The systems that we operate within, especially, prisons are awful and should be abolished. Really institutional, residential kinds of structure, everything kind of works in this continuum back from the prison industrial complex, where we just, for the sake of punitiveness, but also for the sake of capitalism, right? For the sake of profitability and for the sake of societal control, we completely demean and devalue human beings and lock them away. From that, we have this kind of institutionalization. We have, kind of this acute care, psychiatric control models, and then, disability services in the spectrum that we offer those as well, including, all fully home and community based, are on that same spectrum. And reconciling how the abolitionist wants to spend her day every day engaging in this being on the spectrum and really executing some of the institutional harm. I think first and foremost, I think it's important to own that, right? What I hear for a lot of people in any type of challenge to the power that they leverage because of their privileges is that we want to deflect the actual impact of what we're doing and just own our intentions, right? That's not, I don't want to harm anybody, but I do every single day. And there's no way that I can do anything to alleviate any of that harm or to improve or to grow and develop better ways unless I'm willing to start with the ownership of that harm, right? And that, I swear, that's the hardest part for the majority of people, well-intended people who would really like to change the world in some ways, right? They cannot get themselves comfortable. Everything in our life conditions us to not do that, right? I need to tell when somebody, calls you out or calls you in, your initial reaction or response to that is to defend, right? Even if I did do that, that's not what I meant to do. Why not just say, I did that and I hear you and I didn't see that and I'm willing to see that and I'm going to be responsible for that and I'm going to be responsible for the repair work around that and I'm going to be responsible for guarding against that violence from me in the future for someone else, right? That really is an important place to start. And that's a place that I try to wake up to and go to bed with. And it is constant, continuous work. One of the things that I talk about in the Centering the Humans presentation, I share an infograph that a professor created for a class. It wasn't even published research, but it was a professor created for a class. A professor by the name of Bernard Hess, who created this infograph that was looking at the primary 8 white identities. And it's this kind of a little bit of a spectrum, some kind of overlap and wiggly squigglies on the insides. But it really illustrates that the majority of the world thinks that white supremacy looks like hood-wearing, cross-burning white supremacy. That's like the first white identity. It's the most extreme. It's the most, intense in the expression of hate and violence. and it does exist. But the majority of white people don't sit there, right? Mm-hmm. But every white person owns some level of the spectrum and falls somewhere on the spectrum. And just by being white in America carries some violence towards non-white people because of your whiteness, right? And so it does a really good job of kind of going in and defining these different stages, these different expressions of whiteness that we all bounce back and forth on a pretty regular basis. And the eighth identity is an abolitionist, right? Is somebody who's completely willing to sacrifice personal whiteness and whiteness around me for the sake and the benefit of marginalized people, and really speaking truth and power to whiteness, challenging whiteness. And the reality is that nobody sits there continuously either, right? That it is this ongoing kind of back and forth. And the only way that you have any shot of kind of keeping the violence of your power at bay is that you get up every day and you work with it. And that is the least favorite thing that people want to hear, right? That is the bemoaning and begrudging truth, because people want to go to a class. People want to drink a drink. People want to, go to the right hookah bar and donate to the right organization and be absolved of the violence of their power. And the reality is that will never be the case. There is nothing that you can do in a one-off that's going to cause you to be a less harmful human being to the people around you, other than that daily commitment to I'm gonna work on it, I'm gonna own it, I'm gonna be responsible when I mess it up, and I'm going to be genuine in the way that I engage the people around me, and I'm going to leverage my power and for other people, right? Mm-hmm. For me and the work that I do here, that's probably where we are today. That's probably the focus and the emphasis. I just recently wrote an article for the National Leadership Consortium bulletin. It hasn't published yet, but it really was just kind of a recap of some of the initiatives that we've taken on here at ASN in, first and foremost, understanding power and understanding where power is within our organization and what that looks like and what the consequences of that are. But then the work that we're continuing to try to do around leveraging power and redistributing power. So several years ago, we made a pivot from that kind of traditional hierarchy model of organizational structure where the CEO sits on the throne and then everything kind of branches off from that single person. And we restructured the visual illustration of our organizational structure, but also hopefully the operational structure of our organization to be really categorized with relationship maps, where the individual receiving services sits at the middle of that. So within our supported living program, right, you have the person, the ring around that person are your DSPs and your PCAs and your job coaches. The ring around those folks are your managers and your waiver coordinators. And the ring around those folks are your directors and nurses, and really being able to conceptualize everything that we're doing, quite literally centering the people that we support. And with that, it really caused us to engage in conversations around, we spent a lot of time looking at SIN's invalids, disability justice, the 10 principles of disability justice. Yes. And I have spent a long time really focused on the second principle of disability justice, which is leadership by the most impacted. And you look around organizations and they're 100% serving folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they're 100% absent from the leadership of the organization. And while we have a number of DSPs and folks in other positions that work for us that have intellectual and developmental disabilities, we didn't have anyone on our leadership team. And so we created a couple of years ago, we created a position, a director level position, a director of ethics and mission integration. And we created a mandate with that position that it had to be filled by someone, not just a person with an intellectual or developmental disability, but it had to be filled by a person who had experience receiving IDD support services. And so we were able to hire a phenomenal woman who fills that position for us, who's amazing. And her jobs and responsibility are to audit the programs that we operate, to audit the different departments, to audit our human resources and our hiring processes and our training processes, all of those things, and create recommendations for senior leadership to report to our board of directors, to really be able to hold departments accountable for the way that they're operating and to measure that based on the mission of the organization. She also has stood up an advisory council that consists of people that receive services from us. And we're working every day to really look at how we can shift decision-making authority to that group, to really check ourselves about when we're talking about initiatives, when we're talking about things that are coming up, when we're talking about, strategies about how we tackle challenges, to really kick those to that advisory council to empower them to be able to guide and direct the organization in a real and meaningful way. And I don't ever describe that initiative or that work and allow me to stop talking about it without saying we are just scratching the surface. This is very much first kind of baby step, but it is our goal and our commitment that we continue to expand the leadership by the most impacted, and that we continue to get to a place where we are not showing up as professionals in people's lives to tell them what their lives should look like, that we are showing up as community, as a network of care workers who are here to listen to what it is that you want in life, to help you explore life when you don't know what it is that you want in life, and to really let you lead the services that we're providing to you.
I love all of that. No, I think
fun.
And I think about this all the time, like every new rule that comes out, every new compliance component that you have to do. And again, like I always feel like I need to get the disclaimer, probably not with you, but just for, that like I understand the purpose, like, people with disabilities have been hurt in the past, right? I understand the purpose of wanting to make sure another Willowbrook doesn't happen. I get that. But then I just always think about like all the complications of all the things that we have to do, all the hoops we have to jump through. How many people with actual intellectual disabilities had a say in that, right? And I think that as we make small changes, yes, I'll take little wins, but like I just always sit there and even just the language. We have an amazing professor here at the University of Toledo, and she does a lot of work around plain language, right? Because part of our professionalism, part of our, I have this degree and that degree, I can use this really big word. I always mess up when I try and do it, so I don't try and do it too much. But, this whole thing that we make it so complicated, I sit and read those rules and I'm like, dear Lord, I don't know. This is how I'm going to interpret it, though. We're going to go with that. And so it's just like, how many people, nothing about us without us. We've made a whole system about people without them. And so like, how do we begin to shift course? And I know that there are things happening, right? There are things happening where that's happening. Your organization is an amazing example of that. And I know here in Ohio, like we have had some more people involved. But just that whole thought of, because we think we know best, right? And then that, because we think we know best, it goes back to what that mom says. If you think you know what's best for my son's life and not me and not him, then you are devaluing him and you're devaluing his family and who he is. So, yeah, that was a long spiel.
Well,
that made me think of it.
You know, people get really frustrated with me because there are a few conversations, this one included, that I'm not immediately going to zoom out to an even broader systemic level, right? When you think about bills, laws, regulation, when you think about government, when you think about legislative initiatives, which all of our fields and profession are driven and dictated by, right? Like it all starts at some politician putting forth a bill, that bill being written in the most ridiculous encrypted kind of language. And then that going to, a federal government system that interprets that encryption, and produces even more encryption, really, that goes to a state level, that then goes to a provider level, I am of the firm belief and opinion that system that not only does that for disability services, but does it for our educational processes, that does it for our tax codes, that does it for, every aspect of our society. It's intentional, right? It's intentional. It's intentionally structured in a way because there are people that have power within our society. They're born into it. And the focus and the emphasis really is to maintain that. And people are like, Syard, you're probably too conspiracy theory with that. The billionaires don't care about disability services. But that's not true. The overall structure of a society is based on a structure of a society that will produce billionaires is that you have to have this kind of gradient of oppression within your society. And it seems really low hanging fruit when you've got people that are really making decisions for the well-being of our country, that their primary goals and objectives are wealth and power, right? Maintaining wealth and power. That it seems like really low hanging fruit just to devalue folks that have significant limitations in their daily lives, right? We don't approach any of those processes from a human perspective where we say all human beings are valuable, all human beings have things to contribute, and all human beings have needs of other human beings. If we could level set, and I think what we're trying to do here is to recognize that system is never maybe someday it burns to the ground. The likelihood is that system's not changing in my lifetime, your lifetime.
Right.
But what we can do is try to work within the immediate culture that we're operating within, and to level set to this concept of human beings as valuable, even human beings that have done horrible, awful things, right? Like this idea. I think in 2014, I think that was the year, I had the opportunity to do a local TEDx. In Fayetteville, we had a TEDx Fayetteville. And so I got invited to present, and I've given more presentations than I could count in my lifetime, and I'm a talker, and I like to talk, and I like to talk to people, but that was definitely by far the most stressful presentation that I've ever given. One, because I was ridiculous about it, and I was like, you've got 18 minutes, right? All you got is 18 minutes.
Change the world.
Right. The world is listening for 18 minutes. What do you say? When usually I just, what I say are curse words. So I put a whole lot of stress on that. And then we went, and it was like in this theater, and it was on stage. And, I'm a conference room presenter, and used to being able to see the visual and emotional reactions that people are having and kind of adjust what you're saying based on the visual feedback that's coming from the room. I enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy recognizing when I say something that actually hits or clicks, and, being able to build on that, having a dialogue really with people. And this was not that. This was me standing on a stage in a black box. The most I could see was like the silhouette of the front row. I wasn't even sure they were there sometimes. And you're just talking into the abyss and hoping that the people on the other side don't hate you. But what I finally wound up talking about was really human value, and about how we have this false expectation as people, that there are categories of people and that you fit into one of those, where you're either a hero, a victim, or a villain. But the reality is that we are all three of those.
Yes.
And it turned out really well. I was proud of it. And it's weird because I get people every now and then that I'll meet and they'll be like, I saw your TED Talk. And like, what do you say to that? Thanks. I hope you liked it. Was it? Anyway.
No, that's so great. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a concept that has definitely, I see the world through the lens that I see the world through because of ASN. And I try every day to do the work here at the organization that allows the organization to be better because of the lens that it gave me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yay. I love that. Well, thank you. I feel like there's so many things you said, and I feel like this is what what I have learned a lot. Like, the people who I really just value in life, like, always just challenge me. Like, and people like have this false conception, like, oh, I'm really challenged by that, or they're coming at me hard, or, but to have anything productive, and I think you even kind of said this in your presentation, you're like, you're going to have feelings. Like, I'm going to say things and they're going to challenge you. They're going to make you feel uncomfortable. And you have a choice that you can get up and leave, or you can sit here and feel those feelings and experience and grow from them. And that's always a challenge for me, because I really just love thinking I'm always right. It makes my life easier sometimes,
we all do. Yeah, we all do.
But no, I really love that. And I remember even like sitting in there and being like, oh yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with this or this or that. And so definitely just thank you so much. We'll probably wrap it up there unless there's anything major. I need to go look up your TED Talk though now. I really do. Cause like, that's like, I do so much work in that area, like, and this, he can edit it, but like, in the the presentation I give, I talk about the way the systems turn parents and caregivers either into victims, where it's like, oh, it's such a burden to have to take care of a disabled person, or a superhero, right? Like, oh, you're a super parent, or a villain because we don't like what they're doing. And like, the truth is, like, we're all just mediocre probably.
Yeah, like, absolutely.
So yeah, no, I love that. So I'm going to have to look that up. I did a TEDx talk in 2018. No, 2017.
Years are hard. Years were always hard, but the pandemic has made them impossible.
Yes. No, it was 2017. But yeah, it was like the same thing. Like, I have to change the world in 15 minutes. And then I submitted my PowerPoints and I put like jokes, like I put puns on them. And they're like, this is hard for the audience to follow. You can't do. And they like edited a bunch of my crap. I'm like,
oh, that's awful. We had more autonomy and free reign than that. What we had to go one time, they brought in a PR consultant, whatever, and we had to present to those folks. And I am a super procrastinator. Like, I never finish final product until like the night before. And so I didn't even talk about what I was going to talk about. I pulled some slides of something, just got up there and rambled on for a little while. And he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I could listen to you talk for days. So whatever, like, it's fine.
I had the same thing where I'm like, so I'm not done with anything yet, but this is the general idea. And I think I'm going to be fine. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Appreciate your time.
Awesome.
Well, this is fun.
Yes, I appreciate your time, friend. And we'll have to do like a Zoom cocktail hour at some point.
Yes. Well, I have a friend in Cleveland who is like, we're going to come up with a reason for you to come to Ohio. And I was like, well, I have this whole network of friends in Ohio now, so I'm going to have to make a tour.
Yes, you have a whole Ohio like fan club. So absolutely. Come on up.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, apparently I have to go give a tour.
Well, good.
So,
enjoy that.
Thank you so much. You can have a good day. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.